start, a few housekeeping notes. This is a 1 hour and 20 minutes panel where the speakers will do the intervention, followed by a conversation with the audience, as I said. But please use the chats to ask questions during the interventions in case we don't have time in the end, but we are trying to make sure we have time in the end, right? We really will make the best to address the most of your questions. Please keep your microphone muted unless you're requested to speak. This event follows the Open Knowledge Code of Conduct, as we want to promote a healthy, respectful, and thoughtful conversation between people from different backgrounds. And of course, any aggressive behavior will not be tolerated, and participants may be removed if necessary. This is just a quick note to let you know. I hope this doesn't happen. And the official event hashtag is hashtag the tech we want, people want. But you can also use the tech we want in case you want to repercute what is being said. Screenshots are free. You can just take them and put your thoughts out there along with it. And if you want to, please tag OKFN in any network so we can help amplify your posts. So this is panel 1, building together simple tech for stronger communities. The official description is technology doesn't have to be complex to be transformative. In this panel, we explore how accessible community-driven tools, from federated platforms to open source communities, are empowering people to work and act together. Speakers will share real-world examples of low-barrier tech that fosters collaboration, strengthens networks, and helps communities solve problems. We have here today Samantha Blickhan. I hope I'm pronouncing all the names correctly. She's the co-director and Humanities lead at Zooniverse. Malka Older, executive director of Global Voices. Andy Piper, head of communications at Mastodon. Olivier Schulbaum, strategic director at the Platoniq Foundation. And Vallauri, co-founder of the Restart project and member of the Right to Repair Europe. All of you guys are also content partners. I really thank you for that and for being here and for your time. So, as we talked before, I will start with some, let's say, one same question for all of you. And then you can run your interventions and do around this, but it doesn't need to really be answered. But it's just a way of putting some trails so we can go around this initial provocation. As I said, we really want to exercise critical thinking in these summits. We don't really want to, just promote our initiatives, but also think really critically about them, and that's what we're also doing at the Open Knowledge Foundation. So every time we talk about simple tech, which is in the title of this panel, and also in our statement, the tech we want is simple, right? Or when we talk about community tech, or solves people problems, being together, togetherness, and so on, develop together. Usually we are talking about a limited community, right? Even if they are open, it's really hard to get into the massive public and to really replace or offer really viable and sustainable alternatives to the mainstream, right? Look at this form, should replace Google form, but is this really ready to scale? Or take a look at this communication or this network, as we have Mastodon here, or this open science initiative, whatever. All of this looks like, in the end of the day, niche compared to the billions of users and the great usage, right, of mainstream solutions. So I really wanted to put the scale and the reach components in the conversation here with you guys. Please talk about your initiative and your interventions having this in mind. To what extent do your communities or the initiatives you are part of really intend to grow and become popular? It comes to the growth or degrowth conversation as well. I really wanted to put this there. Then maybe we can start by alphabetical order, if it's okay. Maybe starting by surname. So maybe starting with you, Samantha, if it's okay. If not, we can self-organize and go differently. Thank you very much.
Do you still want us to aim for 10 minutes as a response, or
Yeah.
do you want to go shorter than that? Okay, cool. Just
yeah, as you are 5, so like let's say 15 minutes of interventions, and then we can have conversations with the people through the chats or.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here. It's just gone 7 a.m. here in Chicago, where I'm joining from, so I'm getting caffeinated, and hopefully will make sense. That was a little risky to do extemporaneous remarks this early in the morning, but here we are.
Yeah.
So.
Just one thing, like I'm also it's 9 a.m. for me, so really sorry for if it's not making sense. But and also if you want to share your screens for the speakers, just let me know because I need to make you presenters, okay. Right?
Okay.
We're also testing this big blue button thing. Sorry, go ahead, Samantha.
I don't have any slides, so I'm gonna go for it. So yeah, as Lucas said, I'm the co-director of the Zooniverse platform, as well as the Humanities lead. So in the role that I hold with the team, I wear a few different hats that relate to this question. So in my response, I think generally I'll include a little bit of information around how we do tool and infrastructure development and maintenance that I think will help share our, I think, somewhat unique perspective as it pertains to the concepts of community and scalability and sustainability of tech as well. So just a little bit of background, I'll set the stage. For those who aren't familiar with us, Zooniverse is the largest platform in the world for online participatory research. So that is sometimes called crowdsourcing. Otherwise, people call it citizen science or citizen research as well. And our core team is based across 3 institutions. So I'm at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. Another big component of our team is at Oxford University in the UK, and then the rest of the team's at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities in Minneapolis. But we also have collaborators at many other institutions worldwide, and our team is pretty small, but it's made up of web developers, disciplinary research leads, data scientists, and 1 designer. So since the platform began in 2009, more than 500 projects have launched publicly, powered by more than 2.8 million people now who have registered on the platform and who volunteer their time and effort to contribute to online participatory research. And it's across disciplines. We started as more of an astrophysics and ecology platform, but we've really grown. We have linguistics, history, zoology, and I think something that's really crucial, especially to the topic of this panel, is that you don't need any specialist background to take part in Zooniverse projects. They're intended to be broadly accessible by non-experts or people who just have an internet connection and the curiosity and desire to contribute to real research. So to tie this back to the original question, we're in a place where we are a large platform and we do have a fairly large user base, but we're straddling the need to create tools that both serve the needs of a small group of people, so thinking about the research teams within a given discipline who have a project and a research goal, while also being very, very broadly accessible by and for those without that same disciplinary expertise, but who still have this desire to contribute in a meaningful way. So we're constantly in the process of developing new tools and infrastructure. And so we do have to consider this question of growth and scale on a regular basis. We weren't always a large platform, and I think our institutional experience going through that growth process over time from a platform perspective has definitely influenced our current practices when it comes to things like prototyping and scaling products. So to that end, I'll talk a little bit about the main tool that we provide, which is the Project Builder. And this is an open source browser-based tool that allows anybody to build and run a Zooniverse project free of charge. It was built in 2015 with support from a Google Global Impact Award and a grant from the Sloan Foundation. And this is a really powerful tool. It's designed to be highly adaptable across the widely varied needs of the research communities that we serve. But before it was created, all Zooniverse projects had custom front-end interfaces built on a shared back-end infrastructure. And so during that time period, we averaged around 7 new project launches a year. Subsequently, since the project builder, we're able to launch dozens of new projects per year, and at any given time, we tend to have about 80 active projects on the site. And so when researchers come to us wanting to build a project, they can do so in a couple of ways. The most straightforward is just to use that project builder and the tools available there to build projects and workflows, create tutorials, upload data. In order to launch publicly and be featured on our projects page, they have to go, or these teams need to go through first an internal review process by a member of our team, and then through a public beta review, during which a team of Zooniverse volunteer beta testers give them feedback on the project and answer a series of questions that tell us whether the project is appropriate for the platform and ready to be launched. Once these projects have passed review, then we schedule a launch and they move forward with the public aspect of the project. And so I think coming back to this idea of community building and community develop, you can already see just sort of through that narrative around the process that this is very much a group endeavor. We involve volunteers, early on in the process of building projects, but I think I want to talk a little bit about how we build new things, because it speaks really, I think it dovetails really nicely with some of the topics of the summit in general, as well as the specific question that you're asking about here. So in cases where the tools that are available in the project builder aren't quite right for the research goals of a particular team, or we've identified a need among a specific research discipline for a new type of task, we partner with external research teams to create new and custom tools. And typically we'll apply for grant funding to support design, development, project management, and research. And if those funds are awarded, we move forward with the development, and we'll typically test new features on a single project, which is run by those external partners, and then look for additional teams within our networks who might want to be early adopters of the new tool, so we can continue to refine it a bit more through these early use cases. And depending on the outcomes of the testing and the demand for that type of tool within our research community, these new tools can either become immediately publicly available as part of the Project Builder toolkit, or sometimes they can be kept on behind an admin flag as experimental features. And typically we reserve that for features that require a certain level of intervention or assistance on our end for teams to use them. And so we do that to avoid the bottleneck of demand if we have to sort of control that drip feed a little bit more. But in general, this is our process of identifying gaps in the toolkit, developing new tools and infrastructure, starting small and then scaling and making those funded custom tools widely and freely available for everybody to use. So in my capacity as humanities disciplinary lead, it's up for me to determine strategic planning for tool development. And of course, I'm sure as everybody here knows, the challenge is always how to keep tools from becoming obsolete while sustaining those that already work and continue to be widely used. So I prefer to approach the development of our humanities toolkit as something that is as modular as possible. And so part of the way that we do that is to encourage creative reuse of these tools. So one team might combine 2 different features in a way that allows them to move their work forward in a really innovative way without needing custom feature development at all. And so then when a new feature request comes in, if the idea is that the new tool needs to play nicely with the current toolkit, we can then use that opportunity not only to create something new, but also to help ensure the new tools we're building are working in tandem with the existing tools. And this helps us to continue to promote tools as well as sustain them through updates and maintenance that we can bake into those new development efforts. It's a slower way of moving, but I think that's intentional, at least for me, and it's led to a lot of successes within our humanities toolkit. I'll tell you a quick story about that, and then I'll cede my time and we can hear from somebody else. But I love this example because I do think it really speaks to the way that this type of creative reuse really can lead to innovation and I think quite stunning ways. So back in 2018, in the sort of humanities wing of Zooniverse, we pioneered a piece of technical infrastructure that allows volunteers to see and interact with classification data submitted by other people. And the context for that work was to support collaborative methods of text transcription, historical text transcription, and increase the quality of the resulting data. We did some A/B testing of, siloed transcription versus collaborative transcription and found that it actually increased the data quality. And so that was, the research effort, the methodological research effort for that. But the really transformative thing, I think, happened a few years later when our biomedical research communities started building on that same infrastructure to create what we now call correct a machine projects. So the same data ingest pipeline that we built for the humanities focused projects now supports ingesting machine classification data that human volunteers can interact with in order to do things like refine and adjust cellular boundaries onto electron microscopy images in order to do things like help advance our understanding of the human body and research things like bacterial infections. I don't want this to inadvertently come across as serendipity, like, oh wow, this thing we built just really happened to be useful in this other way. This was intentional, and I think this is part of the bell I keep ringing about this sort of slow intentional development, and combined with reuse. We did this by considering the potential relationship between something we were building and its adaptability for adaptation and reuse outside the digital humanities space we were working in. So, and I think that's something that's fairly unique for our team, actually, because we're such a small team. And so I work closely together with astrophysicists, ecologists, and biomedical researchers on a regular basis. And because we're communicating about our parallel ongoing efforts, we have these opportunities for collaboration and creative reuse, which more traditionally disciplinarily siloed organizations just don't have because of the way they're structured. And so, in my opinion, that's really been the most crucial thing in the process of making sure we're not just reinventing the wheel every single time a researcher requests a new feature or a piece of technical infrastructure. So I think in that way, we're thinking about alternatives to a mainstream that is highly focused on innovation and novelty. And, for me, I think that's part of the sustainable alternative component. So I will stop there for now, but I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion after we hear from the rest of the panelists.
Thank you very much, Sam. Intentionality. I stay with like some of your words for the discussion later. So let's go with our following speaker. Can we go with you, Malka? That's fine.
Yeah, great. I am actually in Bonn where it's 2 p.m., but I also just managed to caffeinate before this panel. All the solidarity. I'm also at another conference at the Global Media Forum here, so I hope this space is okay and that everyone can hear me and that the Wi-Fi holds up. So I am the Executive Director of Global Voices. For those of you who don't know, we are a community journalism site that pulls in reporting from journalists all over the world. We also do a bunch of translation of this reporting and these essays so that we can get those stories to more readers. We do research around narrative trends. We do advocacy around digital rights and human rights. And we also support digital activists in indigenous languages. All of these disparate things around the idea that we need to amplify the voices that are underrepresented in most of the media that all of us consume. So I'm coming at this from a very different perspective, Sam, in that we don't create that many tools. We're mostly users of these tools, looking at how we exist as a nonprofit media organization in a digital world. We are exclusively digital. We have no office, we don't print. This is really very much part of our identity of how we can use the internet in the way that, I don't know if it was intended, but that it has the potential, which is cutting across those geographic borders of all kinds. So for us, you know, when we think about technology and scale, I actually have to come around and question some of the premises of this opening, which I think makes it a great opening, actually, because it gives us lots to talk about in different ways. You know, one of the things that we have been thinking about a lot is we think of news and information as a public good. So something that should be available to everybody, that has a lot of externalities to it that are good for everybody, including the indirect people, not just the direct users, something that should be supported. But we are not operating the way that a lot of the traditional public goods like infrastructure, like electricity, piped water, we are not in a monopoly or quasi-monopoly situation. We are in competition with a bunch of commercial news and news purveyors, as well as entertainment, infotainment, all sorts of other things on the internet. And so it's something that we've been thinking about a lot, actually, is how do we compete, scale up? How do we find space for our information, which is all free and freely available? And we're competing now with news organizations, a lot of which have paywalls, a lot of which are just absolutely choked with ads. And yet, you know, being able to scale up, being able to get people's attention is really a challenge in this environment. And so for me, I'm kind of turning the question around and thinking about, you know, I don't think that the simple tech or the tech we use is the barrier to uptake for us, or a barrier for scaling. I think actually, you know, we tend to choose simpler tech because it's easier to get it to more of the people that we want to reach, to people who might be in low bandwidth environments, to people who might not have the latest hardware. And we want to make sure that we're available. We are also very conscious. Global Voices has been around for 20 years. And so, you know, there's an interesting question about innovation there, in terms of a lot of the innovations that have come out in news and media over those 20 years have subsequently disappeared, leaving organizations that bought into them, often with a gap or fall through. And so also, you know, not jumping too fast on bandwagons that might not be sufficiently supported to keep running over time. So these are the things we think about in tech, in terms of like really being able to reach the people, and also, you know, having something that's robust enough to last. And that's where we would really like to be using even more open source tech than we do, because every time we use something that's coming from a corporation, we have the risk that for one reason or another, either the corporation goes down, or they suddenly raise prices, or, you know, the head of it does something really awful, and then we don't want to be associated with them anymore. Sounds very familiar, yeah. So we, you know, it's not just paying, it's also having more control, having more of a diversified base of people who are keeping the thing running. But we are facing this problem of, you know, if everyone is used to, if the vast majority of people are used to using a certain technology, and we want to use something different because it's actually better for us and for most of our users, how do we get people to make the switch? How do we get people's attention when, you know, part of the thing about these more used platforms is that they are flashier. They have things that actually do not work well for a lot of our readers and users, but they draw the attention, and they just, you know, I think there's just a lot of sort of market share and flashiness and throwing money at stuff that we don't have to throw. So I am thinking about scale up from this other perspective. Like, how do we show people that a lot of times the simpler technology is actually a lot better, both in terms of the underlying robustness and often in terms of what the user experience is too. And I think actually it's really useful to disaggregate those two elements of simplicity. many years ago, when I lived in a very low bandwidth environment, I was working in Darfur, and we had only satellite internet. And since it came from our operating budget, we weren't supposed to use it very much. And having the BBC News low bandwidth site, I don't know if people remember this, they used to have a site you could go to that was the news stories with no pictures, definitely no video at that back then. And it was such an incredibly useful thing to have. And as much as we theoretically all have a lot more connectivity now, there are lots of times that I wish all websites had that option when I'm trying to get on my phone when I happen to be roaming or in a place where I just don't have a lot. And so, you know, I actually think that simpler tech gives us a lot more opportunities for scaling up. But how do you get people to know about it? How do you get people to easily be able to switch to that when it does work better? And then flipping, so that's the sort of, you know, the background simplicity of being able, you know, being low bandwidth, being able to be used on older machines. I also am like desperately resisting upgrading my operating system, and there's so many apps that I cannot load. And, you know, I am extremely stubborn and I will not load them, but I'm sure a lot of people just upgrade their operating system. But thinking about that dynamic of like how we can keep things working over time. And then the other part of simplicity, which I think is simplicity for the user. And, you know, this is the thing where we just want stuff that will help us reduce friction, because it is so hard to find readers and bring them in. So how do we think about simplicity as a way that makes it easy and ideally fun for people to be using these tools? And, you know, again, I think that's where a lot of the platforms that have a ton of money to throw around are able to grab that market share and make it harder for us to squeeze in, because they just, I mean, the iPhone, it's just so much fun to use. Remembering back when it took over from BlackBerry, you know, it's such a different feel to it. And how do we, as a nonprofit organization that's you know, trying to attract readers in a simple and direct way, how do we compete with the amount of product prettification and coolification that's going on? So those are my thoughts around this question, and look forward to hearing what the others have to say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Malka. Yeah, many food for thought there. Yeah, thinking about like all this vintage movement that's happening here, like, right, like dumb phones, or, you know, good old websites with no CSS, you know, like these kind of things. But how to think about these things, but also looking forward somehow, right? And anyway, like just some thoughts that we can have a conversation later. Now I want to give the floor to Andy Piper, who is here representing Mastodon, but has an activities and is being part of communities much beyond that. So yeah, please do your intervention. That's a question I think everyone wanna do, right? Like, is Mastodon want to scale and to reach and to become the mainstream? And yes or no? Thank you.
That's a nice simplification. Yeah, this is a super interesting question, and I'm grateful, first of all, to be invited to take part. And I love the challenge we've been set here with this question that we've all been asked. So hello, everybody joining. I'm Andy. I'm head of communications at Mastodon. We are one of the larger federated social networks. We are built on open standards, which we think is great. I'll tell you a little bit more in a second. And in terms of scale, you know, people tend to compare us to existing platforms. I'll call them legacy platforms, such as Twitter, and ask why Mastodon hasn't taken over from or isn't as mainstream as. And let's think a little bit about that. We're actually, there are about 8,000 active server instances of Mastodon right now, and around 800,000 monthly active users, about 10 million registered accounts in total. We're building a social first, user first, I beg your pardon, social platform. And our principles are very strongly around community independence and shared governance around those server instances. We're separate from those corporate legacy platforms. So we don't take venture capital. We're entirely supported by user donations at this time. And we really want to enable an open and safe social internet that encourages anyone to connect. We also want those social spaces to belong to everyone. We want to provide a safe space for respectful public conversation. We want to avoid the billionaire problem. I've come from that problem. For those that don't know me, I did work at a platform called Twitter that no longer exists for a number of years, 9 years. And it was an incredible space, and it helped me to grow a great network. But things can go wrong in those scenarios where you have capital take over a platform and malevolent owners do things. And I think we all know, joining this call and being engaged with the Open Knowledge Foundation, that these are really crucial times for the open web and the freedom of people online. And if we just look at the last 6 months for Mastodon, we've done a lot. We've been trying to do a lot to enable us to grow more, but that's not an end in itself. So in January, we actually shared the news that the company, Mastodon, the GmbH in Germany, is creating a new nonprofit that's going to be based here in Europe. I say here in Europe. I am sitting in London. I wish that I was sitting in Europe, but that's a different conversation. We've grown our team, which is important because previously there's been a perception that Mastodon was operated by an individual, and it's more than one person. There's a group of people that work together, and then there's a community of people that contribute to it. And our founder, Eugene, has chosen to say, look, to make sure that there's no suspicion or concern about the crazy billionaire, we're going to move this into an open foundation. We've also posted recently on our blog about our strategic priorities for this year, and you'll notice that one of them is growth. So these are not technical priorities, they're strategic. So we're restructuring the organization, as I just mentioned. It's going to take a while. There's a number of steps to go through. There's lawyers involved. We want to grow the platform. We want to grow the number of users that use Mastodon and the Fediverse. Mastodon is part of a broader open social web that is built on the same open source, open standard. And also sustainability. And that means essentially that we need to be able to pay people to contribute to the software, and people like me to come and do talks and talk to the media and talk to policymakers. And policymakers are increasingly important, by the way, so we'll come on to that in a second. But we don't necessarily, when we talk about growth, mean Mastodon must be the biggest. Mastodon must be the biggest thing in the Fediverse. Mastodon must take over from Twitter or whatever is there. It's really important to understand, in my opinion, that this is not a zero-sum game. This is open source, open software, right? We don't need to be the winner. We don't need to crush the opposition and copy all their features and be better than them. We need to provide technology that people want. We need to provide spaces that people feel safe in, people feel empowered in, people own the data, people own the conversations. People are not being having their opinions potentially shaped by algorithms or by being shown content that they didn't ask for. So we've also been going out in the last 6 months to a number of events. You will have seen, if you follow us at all, our team at RightsCon, at South by Southwest, at the International Journalism Festival, most recently at the the Internet Governance Forum, getting involved in much broader conversations. And particularly here in Europe, I think many of us have noted a shift in the atmosphere around where people want their technology hosted, where they want their services and data hosted. We've also recently been identified as a digital public good by the UN Digital Public Goods Alliance, which I think is a huge step. I think that's great in that enabling us to go talk to those organizations. Last year, I wrote a blog post around encouraging public organizations to own their own social content, either running their own platforms or providing content socially through platforms that are not commercially owned, that are not going to suddenly be switched off or have an organization's reach limited. And having those organizations join the Fediverse, beyond Mastodon, for example, would grow and enable more people to join the spaces as well. But I mentioned that we don't necessarily need to be the biggest, and this is important. The Fediverse, the number of services that run on this same protocol activity pub can be very diverse. It doesn't have to just be Mastodon. There's PixelFed, there's PeerTube, there's Mobilizon. There's lots of things that federate and can talk to one another openly, and that's important. It enables resilience. We don't want one big server that someone can buy and turn bad, right? We want many independent servers, and we want people to have the choice of who they talk with, who they connect with, the content they see. And that's really important as well. So this growth thing is absolutely a very nuanced conversation. There's also nuance around the fact that the Fediverse was built by people who were very frequently othered by big tech platforms. They didn't feel safe. They didn't feel that their culture was being understood. So localized moderation can be very powerful. We can have communities that moderate themselves and understand the culture locally to that instance or to that server. Again, I worked at Twitter. I believe in a global conversation, the ability to talk in real time around the world and have respectful conversations. But I think global moderation at scale is incredibly difficult because it means that there has to be a lowest common denominator for that moderation. So there's a ton of trade-offs here. We want to grow the number of people that choose to use better platforms that are respecting them, respecting their needs, and not pushing advertising content using algorithms to twist and distort conversations and views. But our goal here really is a healthy diversity. If more of the Fediverse or other tech that is community-driven flourishes, that's a win for everyone. So I would say that when we talk about growth, we talk about growing the pie for everyone in the open community space, rather than Mastodon specifically. Of course, we also want to grow ourselves. So we want to empower more small communities. We don't need to win. We just need to be. We need to exist. We need to provide that alternative, and we are here. And I'm really grateful again to be invited to the conversation today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Andy. Can you hear me well? Because I just, because my thing disconnected, I got notifications. Thank you very much, Andy. That was really cool. We don't have to be the winners. Everything we are doing is following a different framework, a different sky, right? Really, thank you very much. I have some follow-up questions for you, actually, and for the others. But before, let's go to Olivier Schulbaum, who is connecting from the lovely Catalonia, where I lived for a while. Thank you for coming, and yeah, please do your introduction.
Thanks for having me. So first of all, can you hear me well, despite my French-Spanish accents? Cool. So thanks for having us. It's a great panel. So I will basically, since I'm the fourth to talk, I will echo most of what Malka, Sam, and Andy just mentioned about like creating safer spaces for communities. I would even add safer spaces for who runs these platforms. I think we need to consider that. Malka, your mentions to crisis or relevance of independent journalism in times of crisis is really relevant to me too. How also mental health comes, in the center of our table when we talk about navigating digital platforms. So even if we're open source and ethical, We may, create the same bias than TikTok. So we need to be conscious about that. So I'm thinking that, there's lots of projects I would like to talk about apart from ours, but I've been asked to talk mainly about two of the platforms we're involved in. So I'm Olivier Schulbaum. I'm sitting in Balearic Islands right now, so I'm in Mallorca. But we're based in Barcelona. We are called Platoniq Foundation. Don't ask me why, I can't remember. But basically the main claim is creativity and democracy. So just I'm not a tech guy, I studied arts and communication. So I'm really proud about designing platforms that are, impactful from that perspective, not from the tech perspective. So we should always push back the crucial moment when we start writing a code. I think I'm more defending the poetry side of codes and then see if it's relevant for others. So saying that, I will share in the chat a poem I wrote on one of the platforms. It's a little bit long, but so if you're tired of listening to me, you can just try to rap this rhyming poem while I'm speaking. So basically, in the last 2 decades, we have been involved in developing open source civic texts and what is very trendy to call democratic innovation. The OECD likes that term, so I love that term too. Before it was social innovation, but to be social, you need to be democratic, of course. You need to be democratic before you get open source. That's something I learned in all those years. So let's not be the Taliban of open. Usually we create more obstacles by, forcing people to understand our values when we should better explain that we help creating social impact. I think that's worth it. And then, of course, for that, we need open source tools. But I mean, I learned to, maybe it's a message for everybody, I learned to really invert the discourse. So let's not start with closed door. Let's think, because openness creates lots of closed door for average citizens, I would say. So basically, I co-founded Goteo, a platform for civic crowdfunding and what we call crowd advocacy. That helped later on the creation of Decidim, which is the other platform development I'm involved in, which is one of the most active digital infrastructure for participatory democracy. Most of it is institutionalized, so it's basically a project for municipal or regional governments to run, participation with citizens. We need to take care about this institutionalization, so we need a participation wash mission. But anyway, I'm inviting you to join. But basically, Platoniq right now is one of the main contributors of the Decidim, and we're expanding its use beyond institutional frameworks towards grassroots movements, cooperatives. I must say, as a self-critique first, both platforms are not simple tech, especially they're not simple tech for who is running them. Because they've been built, that's a lesson I share with you, trying to integrate too many values, which make the cost of them and the administration of them much costful for who runs them. So if we had got Kickstarter, it would be easier to run. But we want, people to fund projects through Goteo and get tax advantages through it. That's why we're a foundation. So we're institutionalizing something that could be much more simpler. So let's we have institutional bias when we try to have a public impact. It's important to say. So that influenced the design of these platforms, and there's many mistakes we have created. Actually, we start Goteo again from scratch this year, just to let you know. So I think these two platforms have a very complex, maybe too granular operational design behind it. They're simpler though for community using them. So that's one of the messages. So the poem I wrote has to do with the type of projects we help or campaigns we help funding. So just to cite a few ones, we help putting prison, entering jail for corrupt ministers. That's the type of project we helped. Obtaining fair pay for hotel workers, a movement called Las Kellys by themselves. Street vendors that usually used black market now have created their own trademark, their own clothes, and their own cooperatives. That's a few examples. And I would call, maybe to reflect on Sam's platform, that's what I love to call citizen political science, right? This is something which is missing. Because actually, if we want to bring a corrupt minister in jail, that's a big obstacle, money. So that's why we're covering it up. Yeah. So basically, that's something I like to say. So citizen political science versus citizen silence through the obstacles that public administrations impose on us. So we cannot have the incidents we deserve. So basically, I also want to mention my team's curating work right now. If you're interested, we basically researching what we call wilder participation. So not wider, but we need to rewild the participation in the platforms. We're designing, I think, that very deinstitutionalize them and decolonize them, of course. Especially, I'm interested in the context of youth-led engagement with mental health, digital anxiety that some of our platforms are creating, and climate anxiety. Just to let you know, maybe it's because I'm the father of a great daughter. I think that's something we should take care of. So how the platforms we're using or we're developing first impact youth. So basically from the set of questions you sent, stop me whenever because I don't calculate the time. I would say civic tech for me, I would recall it community tech. And for me, it's absolutely not a product. I think Andy was mentioning that. We don't have to win. We don't have to be the losers neither. But I think it's a way, civic tech or community tech is a way of relating, right? So Gautier and Decidim are, what we learned from them is that tech is never neutral. We all know that. And I think tech or civic tech is a mirror or a distortion sometimes of the way people organize naturally in life, relate and decide together. So we should be able to provide them what I call an experience they already lived analogically or hybridly. So if I'm a member of a food cooperative consumption, you know, the way I'm organizing with my neighbors needs to be something similar to the way I'm asked by an institution to collaborate for public policies. So now I want to stop a little bit. You mentioned the last bit of your question is about popular. So popular is, you know, it's easy to fall in populism when we talk about popular. So I reframed it for whom and on what terms. So I'm a big fan of design justice frameworks, but I don't have time to go through it. But I think the platform should also be, you know, designed by the most affected, right? So I want to pause for us a little second on the term popular. So when we ask our platforms like Gautier or Decidim, but others, become popular, we need to be very, very careful, I think, because that word often implies mass adoption, as Andy was mentioning, virality, which is not easy, or commercial success. So based on logics of visibility, competitions, and speed. So let's slow down that a little bit because I think community tech doesn't follow the same incentives, so or shouldn't. So then corporate tech. So it's not optimized for clicks. It's not optimized. It should be optimized for care, mutual care. Our participants, the people, the communities using our platform should be able to have tools for mutual care, feel a safe space. We talked about that with Andy too. And we should basically optimize it also for accountability. We talked about ownership of our data, of our stories, of the project we build together, which is also ownership of the governance of this platform. Why not? So let's make them cooperatives at some point. So basically, I would say Gautier and Decidim became widely, certainly more widely as a way of rewilding, used to not because they mark themselves very or marketed themselves very well, but because they are, I think for me, they solve real political problems. So how to fund the commons, how to make participation accountable. They are aligned with movements like you know, municipal movements, the commons movement, communities that were looking for alternatives because of public budget cuts, most of it. And also because they embed participation in a sense in long-term governance models. So not just one-off events. So it's not like a summer hit. So yes, so community tech doesn't need to be popular. It needs, for me, and we heard about the word, it needs to be powerful, plural, and political from the start, I would say. So if I have one more moment, I would like to quickly mention the idea of these type of tools being mirroring participation. And the opportunity we have with Decidim and Gautier is that they're, of course, they're open source, so we can measure how these platforms export in different cultures. So Decidim was basically launched by the City Council of Barcelona, but what happens when it's launched in Helsinki? The culture, the law of participation locally influence how we deploy these spaces. And actually, if you're interested, I can share a report I'm writing basically on the fact that these platforms, especially the Decidim in Barcelona, reflects not only the participation tradition of assemblage of citizens and environments and the city itself, it also reflects the way the city has been built. So if you look at the urban planning and you look at the operational design of these platforms, it really reflects a way of thinking, which can be a bias if we export it. Because, for example, in Barcelona, you know, we have an designed structure, so everything is over-designed. So the platform is over-designed. There's too many possibilities for communities to run it by themselves. So I think it's important to mean, how do these platforms export culturally? So I don't know if you have the same issue, but I think considering participation, you need to, basically learn how to basically adapt these platforms so they deploy in a natural way for the people using them. And then the last concept I want to introduce here, and we're working a lot with the idea of, let's not talk about user experience for our platforms. We talked about POOX, which is really a bad name, but it's basically about political user experience, right? So it's about the fragility of safe participation, right? So I think a good interface is never enough, even if it looks simple, if people don't trust the process. And if they don't see themselves reflected, as Andy was mentioning, in data structures, if moderation is extractive, they totally disengage very quickly. So it's simple, but disengaging is even simpler. So that's why we're experimenting with what we call the idea of safer space, with the R, because we know it's not possible to create a safe space, but not as a fixed rule, I would say, but as a governance approach. So basically that's, Decidim is built on a social contract, if you want to know about it. So on the top of the fact that it's open source, we have a social contract, which basically means neo-Nazi parties or neo-Nazi groupuscules cannot use legally Decidim, even if it's open source, because on the top of it, you need to agree on a certain series of values, which are basically translated into technological design. And I would stop there just saying, but Gauthier, we also constantly navigate these tensions of between radical grassroots project and public institutions. So we're in the middle, and we do the best job we can do, to scale, but not like in Silicon Valley, scale with meaning.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So many things, like, that's great to see that the chat is really active between you guys as well. Some mutual understandings are emerging there, and also provocation questions. That's great. Thank you very much, Olivier. I'll just don't go further with my intervention because I want to give the floor to Hugo. You have your 10 minutes to bring us the perspective of also hardware, right? What to do with those things. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me and us here today. It's a great conversation. And I think I'm going to connect directly with some of the points that Malka was making, because there's kind of a meta meaning of even the name of this summit, the tech people want. We are, as a community, the community empowered and supported by the Restart Project, and similarly, around the Right to Repair Europe coalition. Our goal is actually bringing the voices and the needs and the demands of real people that want tech or electronics rather, that is durable, repairable, long-lasting, environmentally compatible, and that moves us away from the overproduction, oversupply, and overconsumption of it. So in a sense, this is like the premise that kind of connects both the overall purpose and also the way we like to look at the way we use tech internally and for achieving our goals. In that sense, I'd say, well, we are a particular type of community because the activities of the communities are partly independent from whatever tech we would like to suggest that gets used, in the sense that this is a real global community of groups that operate in their own communities in person, repairing things collaboratively. So you probably all have been to a repair cafe, a fix-it clinic, a restart party, or one of these many thousands of initiatives globally. And we don't own that. However, we try to bring together the voices of people that embody that community and to help make it more visible, more accountable, and more impactful, thanks to, for example, collecting open data that we then release to make the case for the universal right to repair. So to kind of highlight to policymakers the gaps that exist in making products more repairable and reusable, etc. And we do this as a different community that kind of connects with this one, which is the Right to Repair Europe Coalition, which ultimately brings these demands that have emerged from a fairly wide repository of open data about repair, which we manage and release every year, and make sure that policymakers, particularly in the EU, use it to make their decisions about what type of legislation to prioritize, with certain degree of success and plenty more work to do. But in essence, we have succeeded in bringing people's voices with real objective data to count in the decision-making rooms. And there's so much more that we need doing, let me be super clear. But reflecting back on the tech, obviously, we do have, as Restart, we created an online community that is called restarters.net, and it does have fairly, well, I'd like to say simple, and again, just as Olivier, I'm not the tech person here. I have a background in working in not-profit sector as someone that can speak some of the tech speech without being that my main magic power, but being able to understand what people are struggling with at a technical level, so that we try to remove those barriers. And what's key to us is making sure that the in-person activities don't get deprioritized by having to deal with an online platform. So we have a platform that I think is quite successful in the sense of listing over 1,000 of these groups that use it to promote their events, to look for volunteers, to upload the data, and 6,500 or so people are registered to use it. But it is not our ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to build a system where products are designed to last longer. So we use that community as a way to push for that ultimate goal. And one of the ways that we have decided to not make it about ourselves is indeed looking at how different organizations around the world were doing some things that were, to an extent, quite similar to what we were doing, and try to empower all of us to move towards an open standard that would allow us to collect data and publish it collectively to achieve the goals I was talking about. And ultimately allowing, through partnerships, different organizations to deploy in a software as a service type scenario, like our platform, to their own users, choosing the aspects that they want to use. But again, not to detract from their goals, rather to kind of reduce some of the friction for them to achieve their accountability around their environmental and other types of impact. And we know we've been involved in some projects that we're actually trying to push, like a tech development, even community focused, as a way to increase the efficiency of the community in-person activities. And I say this smiling because these are some of our lessons learned, as people say. They were funding opportunity linked to developing projects where, by having a better tech infrastructure, people would become, that was the hypothesis, more efficient at repairing electronics, and therefore we would scale the impact by investing in the tech. The reality was that most of the people that engage in such activities don't really want to spend that much time feeding into no matter how open tech setup, but they rather just do the thing that makes them excited, which is take apart a product and trying to fix it and share the skills with the person they have in front of them. And I think this is important because it shouldn't be demanded of them that they put extra efforts as much as possible to achieve a goal that they might see as secondary compared to how we look at this as a system-based change that needs to be tackled from a policy making perspective. And so this kind of links with our work at policy level through Right to Repair Europe, which is a coalition we established, we co-founded in, now it's almost 6 years ago, when we saw an opportunity in the EU specifically to influence some of the legislative developments around eco-design of products, consumer rights and repair being one potential better defined right. And so we transferred some of the work to engage with a set of actors that are completely different in a way. So bringing certainly, yes, the community grassroots driven repair movement with us, but also trying to work with more environmental NGOs, companies interested in future business models for repair, other initiatives that might not be so familiar with tech per se, but are engaged in trying to influence green legislation. And I'm reflecting here on the fact that we chose not to focus heavily on building new tech in this case, but actually building a coalition that was where it was most crucial that we came up with a really good charter for how organizations work together, what kind of governance you create. And we just decided to use non-particularly open but freely available to us tech tools to facilitate collaboration. Not because we don't believe in that, but because we wanted to purposefully avoid additional friction when working with a range of partners that are less coming from the open world and very, very busy doing other things that are very important. And so we now are a coalition of 180 plus organizations in 30 European countries. And yeah, we try to keep, aside from the licensing of our content, we try to keep the conversations about what tech to use minimal, not because we don't think they're crucial, but because in that part of our work, they're not the reason we're there. We're not there to specifically put that flag. And yeah, so finding the right balance between what does scale mean and what does open in this case mean, I think is quite important.
Thank you very much, Hugo, and all of you. I really didn't need to moderate and to stop you guys from speaking, so thank you for sticking to your 10 minutes. We have 20 minutes for conversations now, around 15 to 20. So I don't know where to start. Like, there are many discussions happening in the chat. There's a question that has just been made. I have also my own. Maybe you guys have also interactions between you as well. Maybe we can start with this last question, and while I scroll back to the chat and to see if there's any juice that we can extract from there. So Subodh is asking, how simple tech can empower people's movements and be used as tools for social audit? So this is the topic, social audit. I don't know exactly what he means by it, he or they mean by it. But anyway, would like to learn about some real life examples. I'm Subodh from Open Knowledge Initiatives at IIIT Hyderabad, India. Does any one of you, maybe Olivier, I just want to point to you as you were talking about like the organizing component, but like maybe Malka as well. Anyway, just leave the floor for self-organizing social audit.
Maybe I can be very short. I mentioned a campaign of concrete community, so riders reclaiming their rights, hotel chambermaids reclaiming the fair rents, what we call the renters movement in Barcelona, fighting for rent strikes to get fair rents. What I see as a common element in there, and it's, I don't know how many of you are into political science, but I see, but it's maybe in the wrong interpretation, in this not by default open movement, because some of them may be a mix of top down and bottom up, but they all share a specificity that they use simple tools and they become what I would say digital or platform unions, new types of unions. They're not reclaiming the old way of maintaining or scaling unions, but I do interpret them that they use tech the same way new types of unions would use it. So maybe it's too optimistic, but I think it's really important. So they have their own audit mechanisms, but I would also say by default, the two platforms I was mentioning, Decidim, it's a municipality platform developed by City Council of Barcelona. Apart from the social contract, there's many accountability issues and anonymized data. Everything is guaranteed, and I don't know any clear breach for data in any of the Decidim platforms. So as part of the audit, we also have an API, and we do provide all sorts of stats on Goteo. They are anonymized, of course, and we also have what we call a social impact calculator, so that would also help you looking at all the data about a specific movement or a series of campaigns, what the money is used for, how they've scaled in 2 years after the campaign, and that also helps you to envision how much impact you can create when you're a backer. So for €1,000, if I'm able to give €1,000 a year to these new citizen-based platform unions, I would get first a tax certification, but I would also have a social impact calculator that would let me know how many employment I would create, how many laws I could influence on all that type of stuff. We could, if you're interested, I can also share how we did build these social impact calculators based on the SDGs. Sorry, I was.
Does anyone want to follow up? Thank you, Olivier. Maybe I can reframe it to Malka. Maybe I mentioned it before because that's what I had in mind, being a journalist as well, like in my first degree, like social audit, like thinking about this in the sense of like reading the world through different lens and through different tech, right? I think that's somehow what Global Voices do. I don't know, just want to hear some words from you in that sense, if it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, again, part of the really important thing is making sure that, because what we want is we want to have stories that are from all over the world, that are really from people whose stories don't get picked up other places. And sometimes that's because the mainstream news doesn't think it's important. And sometimes it's just because of that there are barriers to people writing and sending and submitting these stories. And so for us, one of the issues around simple tech is, again, like if you are in a place where you don't have bandwidth. I mean, one thing we've experimented with, for example, is we were doing trainings on journalism and co-writing particularly, and like doing it on Zoom was too much for a lot of people. So we were trying to combine like recorded videos that people could download slowly over time with what's up for the discussion, and trying to figure out, and none of these, I should say, were what we considered optimal. I mean, we wanted to find better ways. It's trying to meet the places where people are in the technology that they are using, comfortable using, know how to use, already have, doesn't cost them money, with the stuff that fulfills the needs we would, what we would like to have, which is, we would like it to be open source. We would also like it to be a lot more secure than WhatsApp. That's another element too. I mean, there's bandwidth issues, and then there's security issues and questions about like how people can safely participate in these things. So, I think having the tools for people to be able to communicate, to get together, to share their stories is just, it's so fundamental. And honestly, again, like the simplicity is very, very helpful in that. Like that's really what we want. The question is just then if the wider audience, and especially the audience of rich people in rich countries, is conditioned to say, oh, news is only real if it comes with like a designed graphic and some music in the background, and also the production value should look really good. Otherwise, how can I trust it? When that conditioning has happened, it's how we can make sure that the simple stuff can also get through, and that people can see this as a real and important thing to pay attention to.
Great, thank you, Malka. I'll just go to the other questions so we have time to address them. I think there are three broader topics that maybe I'll put, introduce them to the table, and then you can just take whatever you want or make connections. The first one is Alistair, who asked about ecological impact of tech. So he's wondering how the other speakers are considering the eco impact of the tech they use or they develop. So ecological impact. The other one is on education, like why we are not engaging with tertiary education students as like next generation kind of thinking, right? Like to adopt the tools we are talking about here. And the third one about mental health. Someone is saying that I'm a refugee, and with my organization we work with other refugee women in Costa Rica, Central America, and putting mental health in the center as like how we design simple tech, and how can simple tech take care of health, mental health of the users. So ecological impact, mental health, and what is the other one? Sorry, the education, young people, basically. So like three topics. Any one of you can just jump in and address however you want.
I can talk to all of them, but let me mention the university or the education element of it, which is that there is a community of universities in Europe, particularly that I know about. There may be elsewhere outside of Europe. I hope there are that are using the Fediverse for sharing their knowledge. I know that there was a real sadness amongst many of that folks in the academic community about what happened to Twitter, and the fact that increasingly they felt unsafe sharing, for example, climate research and other things on that platform because of being brigaded by folks with denier opinions, I suppose. But yeah, it's a slow movement, but I think that there's an effort for some organizations to rebuild that community in the Fediverse, and of course also on Blue Sky. And I think that can help a lot to help people to see what there is. One of the things I observe in my space, which is in my case the Fediverse, is that from a developer perspective, there's probably fewer younger folks getting involved in the space, and that concerns me a little bit. I'd rather see a lot more excitement in the younger generations getting involved. Also, the one or two younger folks that I'm familiar with have tons of energy, and that's really exciting, and we need that as well. We need that sort of energy and excitement to propel us forward. I mean, there's there can be, I'm first of all, I'm British, and secondly, I'm naturally cynical, but I'm also British, so doubly cynical. So I'm probably not, I have to really push myself some days to be optimistic, and it would be great to have more folks in the education space coming through and bringing that energy and excitement and engagement with them. I can talk to both of the other topics. I'd love to give the floor to other folks on the panel.
Yeah, Sam, please go ahead. And here's the thing, we can use the raised hands tool here if you want to go next. Thank you, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, similarly, I could speak specifically to these questions, but I think it's interesting that they all seem to have this certain element of the individual rights of a user or a participant. I think there's this interesting question around what do maintainers owe to their audiences. And the example that I'll use that I think speaks a little bit to all of these questions is Zooniverse projects have incorporated machine learning for the better part of a decade. This is not new in our space in the way that it is fairly novel in terms of the current conversation, which is, to be fair, is more focused on generative AI. But as this sort of perspective shift is happening, as awareness increases, there are really important conversations that need to be had. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're running a series of workshops, virtual workshops. They're small group discussions that involve stakeholders across our audiences. So project participants, volunteers, research team members, members of our team, and then like topic area experts more broadly, to come together and actually hear directly what is important, what is difficult, what is on top of people's minds in this space, so that we can respond directly to the needs of these varying communities. And I think everybody on this panel, understands that even when you identify subgroups within a variety of communities that use your technical product, even those small groups are not a monolith, and it's impossible to produce a piece of tech that's going to be everything to everyone. But I think in all of these cases, the benefit I think that we have from the shared ethos up here, which I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think even just the ethos of the summit in general around listening, around being responsive, not being driven by capital or innovation, allows us to be in a position where we can hear specifically what people are looking for, whether that's from the perspective of educators who want to incorporate projects into their classroom. We can work with them to figure out how to do that in a way that is beneficial for students and not extractive of their labor. When it comes to ecological impact, the workshops I'm talking about, we're including a massive survey so people can tell us if climate and energy consumption is top of their mind in terms of thinking about machine learning in our projects. I don't remember what the third one was, but I think that that's sort of my general response is that the ethos of it is really aligned, I think, with a lot of what people have been talking about. So I know that's sort of a answer, non-answer, but I just wanted to draw that connective thread because I like doing that.
No, thank you, Samantha. It's good. We are thinking together. That's totally fine. Maybe I'll give the floor to Hugo to maybe address the climate and the sustainability component, but also adding one more thing, like just to address one of the questions that is there that is very interesting. Maybe it's not for you, but for everyone to think about as well. So how do we strike the right balance between collaborative and simple? Because collaborative is not simple. Go, Hugo, for you.
Yeah, I think, there was a question around young people, and I'll post in the chat now some work we've done with younger people, again on building or testing out repair initiatives run by young people in universities. And interestingly, again, there was a platform divide in the sense that students that we found in universities, this was in the UK, by the way, were trying to suggest that it would work better for them if it was Teams compatible, because that's what they use. And I say this with personal pain. And it's interesting to see that ultimately the projects, the pilots that emerged, were very much offline, as in activities that people did together. So they were not so dependent on platforms. But I think we need to also acknowledge that if you're working in the context of universities, there's 4 reasons that depend on strategic or not so strategic decisions taken by universities. There's platforms that are very pervasively used there that might teach us the opposite of open. So there's that. And I guess I can't answer competently on the issue of mental health, but I think in this striking the balance in how we have goals that might be using tech in part to achieve such goals. There is also the issue of asking ourselves, not just for ecological reason, but for like an integral 360 degrees ecology, how much do we want to compete with other platforms and other kind of doom scrolling scenarios where our messages, strategies, and priorities might get diluted with sort of online zapping from this to that. So in a sense, of course, a lot of the projects in our session are deeply rooted into building tech and using lean, hopefully tech to kind of engage people to achieve something else. But there's also maybe a question of how do we operate inside but also outside of the system to kind of improve our balance and be a bit more critical of the online first nature of most things that are happening right now.
Oh, we could be talking and discussing for much longer. I feel that this is kind of like, I hate being the cutter, you know, but we're on time. I'm sorry. I really hope this also helped you guys connect to each other. I think there are like many overlaps and things that we could do together from now on. Not only you, but also the audience. Thank you very much, everyone who is following us for the participation. It's been very exciting and many food for thought. Like I really leave this panel thinking, and with other questions to follow up. Anyway, like I think this is the best way to measure if a conversation was worth it, right? Thank you very, very much for all of you. We are now having 8 to 10 minute break, so we can just breathe a little bit before the next session, which will be around AI. Very interesting, and I promise so engaging as this one. So everyone who is with us, thank you very much, and thank you, Wendy, Malka, Olivier, Sam, and Hugo.
Thank you so
See
much.
you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.